So good afternoon all. Welcome back to this post-lunch session. Today, now in this post-lunch, I'll be talking about Windows. So morning we talked about only Linux. Now let us discuss Windows operating system. So Naresh, can I start now? Naresh, are you there? Okay, I'll start now. So thank you. Let us discuss about Windows, and we'll discuss with starting with history of Windows. So you might have heard about Windows 10, Windows 8, Windows 7, right? Windows XP, Windows Vista, sorry, and Windows say 98. So before Windows 98, I'm sure that you might have not heard what is the older version of Windows. So in this session, we'll just discuss the history of Windows and then find the fundamentals of Windows. So Windows started in 1981 with something called Interface Manager. So Microsoft only has developed this particular operating system, which was actually called as an Interface Manager. And in 1983, this Interface Manager was renamed as a Microsoft Windows, which was nothing, which was extension of MS-DOS, right? That provide you the graphical user interface for the desktop users, for the PC users. So with this, the graphical user interface era at Microsoft had begun. So Microsoft only has started this graphical user interface operating system. Before that, they were not having graphical user interface operating system. It all started in 1981. As you know, that Unix was in 1969. Windows is in 1981 and Linux is 1991. After 10 years of Windows, Linux had come. So if you see this, Windows 1.0 was released in 1985, right? Which was more an extension of MS-DOS than its own operating system, but it did something called multitasking and it integrated mouse. So mouse was not integrated earlier, but with this, mouse was supported here. Now, the application, if you see in Windows 1.0, was MS-DOS executive, calendars, notepad, which still you are using, calendar also you are using, some terminal command prompt, calculators, clock, reverse C, and lot of things were there with this Windows 1.0. You can see this is the actual look of Windows 1.0, which was developed in 1985, way back in 1985, right? After Windows 1.0, next comes Windows 2.0 in 1987. The only advantage what it gave here is overlapping windows. Earlier, there was not an overlapping windows. If you are opening this application, one application only can be opened. But here, multiple application you can open on the screen, right? On the screen, you can open multiple operating system with Windows 2.0 in 1987. And this Windows 2.0 was able to access up to 1 megabyte of memory. So that time 1 megabyte was huge, right? Now you're talking, now it's actually in my system, in this system where I'm sitting and giving this presentation, in this system we have 32 GB of memory. You can see the difference, 1 MB to 32 GB. It's huge difference, right? So this is the look and feel of Windows 2.0. After that, in 1990, Windows 3.0 came, right? Which was a huge success, right? Because the powerful new application which helped Microsoft to sell more than 10 million copies of this particular operating system, making it the best selling graphical user interface in the history of computing. So you can see here, this OS was having a very new look, right? And it could access up to 16 megabytes of memory. So you might have seen this game, right? Reverse C. So because of this game, this was a huge success, Windows 3.0, because a lot of people were buying this particular version of Windows in 1990. Then comes after Windows 3.0, 3.1 in 1992. So the feature, if you see here in Windows 3.1, is they are giving true types of fonts. Now, what do you understand by true types of fonts? Currently, which we are using here, currently you can see here, these are true types of fonts. You can scale it, you can enlarge it, you can make it bigger. Whereas earlier, if you see, there was a green computer, right? You have a command prompt there, the fonts, you cannot scale it, you cannot zoom it, right? And you cannot change the fonts also. So true types of fonts can be zoomed, you can zoom it, you can enlarge it, you can make it bigger. So this operating system, Windows 3.1, supported this particular feature, which is a true type fonts. Apart from that, it also supports multimedia. So before 3.1, multimedia support was not there with the Windows. So with this 3.1, they added the multimedia, so you can play songs and watch movies, something like that in this. Okay, so here, this operating system was first integrated with something called Windows networking package, which is offered by Microsoft. So along with this, networking has started in the Windows. Before that, networking was not a part of Windows. With this, networking was started. So using that networking, you can provide peer-to-peer file and printer sharing capabilities. So the files which is kept here, you can copy to other system using this networking feature, which is there in Windows 3.1. So this is a feature which is there in 3.1. Networking package was offered here by this Microsoft. Then comes NT in 1993. So Windows NT, you might have heard about this, right? So here it is a port designed to be portable to non-Intel processors. So before NT, you could only run the operating system on Intel processors, whereas with NT onwards, you can install this operating system to any other hardware, non-Intel hardware, right? So this is the advantage of this NT, and it is intended for use in network servers. So with this, they started something called Windows Server versions, right? So Windows NT was having both server and desktop versions. So again, because of the server, it is based on an entirely new operating system kernel. It is based on entirely new operating system kernel because they were supporting something called Active Directory or something like that. So they wanted to have this new kernel. So you can see this is what is the look of Windows NT in 1993, what it had come. Then comes Windows 95. Then comes Windows 95. Again, Windows 95 came in 1995. And the advantage of this is what? It is supporting threading, the preemptive multitasking, and also networking was already there. But the GUI, if you see from NT and before, it is totally revised. You can see it is looking more genuine, good graphical user interface as compared to earlier. So this is the advantage of Windows 95. The graphical user interface, they have revised, right? And along with this 95, they added something called Internet Explorer for this internet browsing. So earlier Internet Explorer was not there before 95, but they added Internet Explorer, and which became actually the most portal for web communication and all. So this is the Windows 1995 or Windows 95. Then comes Windows 98. I hope so many of you have already worked on this Windows 98, right? And it is actually, if you see the feature, what it is giving is it is supporting something called DVD. The DVD was supported in this. Apart from that, USB, AGP, and FireWire. FireWire is nothing. It's again storage, I can say, device which was supporting here by this Windows 98. And along with this Windows, the FAT32 file system was supported. Right. So along with this, the FAT32 files system has been supported. Now, what is FAT32 file system? Now, if you have seen that all the pen drives or storage device what you're buying, by default, the file system is FAT. Suppose you are buying a 32 GB or 64 GB USB pen drive. If you see what type of file system which is there in that device is always FAT32, right? And FAT32 is common file system for all other devices also, or other operating system also. Okay, so this is, you can see the look and feel of Windows 98. Now, one more thing here, if you see FAT32 file system, the amount of file, a single file, the space which is occupying by single file is up to 4 GB. The single file cannot become more than 4 GB. So it is not supporting the single file which is more than 4 GB, the FAT32 file system. Then comes Windows 2000, right? Now here you have it, what it is supported here is it's Active Directory. The 2000 was having two flavor. One is desktop, other is server, desktop and server. So with the server, they came with the concept of something called Active Directory, right? And using this, you could create virtual private network with this Windows 2000. Again, it also supports the data encryption on your hard drive, even on your network. So this has been supported by Windows 2000. So if you see, you have two parallel things. One is desktop versions, other is server versions. The servers started with Windows NT, then Windows 2000, right? Then 2003 and onwards. So after this Windows 2000, you have something called Windows Millennium. In the same year, 2001, it came in the market. But it was having very good feature. The feature is called that if in the case of your system fail, right? Suppose the power went off in between, system fails. So if you see that system fails, it will not boot it, right? It will show you the blue screen. So you can recover that using something called last known good configuration. You can boot your system with the last good configuration which was stored inside the system when it booted. So when it booted last time correctly, that point onwards it will actually boot. So it will restore from that particular point. So this is one of the good feature what they have introduced here. But here the problem is with this is it is criticized for stability issue. It is not stable. Windows ME was not actually stable. So that's why it was referred as a mistake addition or many errors addition, right? So Windows ME is mistake addition, means ME. Then comes Windows XP in 2001. And it had come in two flavors. I hope so many of you have worked on this particular operating system. Still people are working on this. But Microsoft has stopped support of Windows XP. And it had new features that no previous version of Windows was giving, right? So this was actually lasted longer as a Microsoft flagship operating system, because from 2001 to 2007, this operating system was on demand. People were buying this operating system. They are getting this, right? And you can see this is the look and feel of Windows XP. But they have stopped that support for this XP. XP is no more available now. Then comes 2003. It is actually called Windows Server 2003 in 2003, and that was server version. And if you see in 2007, Windows Vista came, which was again not so successful, not so huge, right? Parallelly in the server version, 2008 came, then 2012 also came the server version. But Windows 7 also, apart from this Windows XP, was very, very famous. Still people are using. And for Windows 7 also, Microsoft has stopped the support. Support is no more available for Windows 7 also. And currently what we have from Microsoft desktop version is Windows 10. I guess all of us are using Windows 10. In between Windows 8, 8.1 also is there. People are still using that also, right? And if you see the server class machine from Windows 2008 server to 2012, then 2016, and currently what we have in server class of Windows machine is 2019, right? So apart from Windows 10, what we have is server is 2019 server. So this is a brief history of Windows. I hope it is clear. Any doubt is there? Please ask me. Otherwise, I'll continue. Now let us see the architecture of Windows. If you would have seen the architecture of Linux, what we had the hardware. On top of hardware, what we had a kernel, right? And on top of kernel, what we had is shell, and then applications. But here it is totally different. Here you have a hardware. If you can see, this is the hardware. On top of this hardware, you have something called HAL, hardware abstraction layer. Any Indian OS is in marketing. See, Sudeep Bunia is asking whether do you have any Indian OS in marketing? Okay. Indian as such, we have not developed any operating system, but what we did actually as a CDAC, if you would have, if you know that, we have something called BOSS operating system, Bharati operating system, and that has been developed by CDAC Chennai. And that operating system, what they did, they took the kernel of Linux, right? And that Linux kernel, the source code they were taken, they read the source code and modified the source code, right? And then they made one operating system which is called Bharati operating system. And that is actually support now, it is not there for that. CDAC Chennai stopped giving support, but still that operating system is available for use. People can use it. Are we supposed to use Windows version for organizations only, for which only premium full support is available? I am not getting this question. Are we supposed to use Windows version for organization only for which only premium full support is available? Okay. Okay. So in Windows, see, support means what? What do you mean by support? Windows, if you want to use it at your end, suppose you are at from the personal use you want to use, or you want to use for the organization, you have to buy the license, right? You have to buy the license if you want to use for personally as well or for the organization. Now, to buy the license, you have to pay the whatever they are charging. For example, Windows, say 10 is charging from 15,000 to 20,000 rupees, or 10,000 to 20,000 rupees, right? That you have to pay. And in that, they are also providing you the support. What do you mean by support? Suppose Windows is actually some new hardware you bought, right? Suppose new some pen drive has come, all right? That pen drive you are attaching to Windows, and Windows is not able to detect that pen drive. So in that case, why it is not able to detect? Because that hardware is new to Windows. So Windows has to give the driver for that particular hardware. So that is what is called support. So you have to buy the actually the licensed version of Windows to get the support from the Microsoft Windows. So if you put on the Microsoft community saying that this hardware is not supported by Windows, they will actually create the driver for that, and they will give you if you bought that Windows, right? Okay. So here, if you see, so in Windows you have computer hardware where you have CPU, mouse, keyboard, whatever is there. And then you have HAL, hardware abstraction layer. So hardware abstraction layer is nothing. Here your driver of all the hardware is stored in this particular. It is actually small kernel. HAL is nothing. It's a small kernel where only hardware or device driver for that hardware is stored, right? So on top of HAL, you have something called kernel. Now kernel is nothing. Your operating system is actually called as a kernel. So this is Windows kernel. And then on top of kernel, you are running the application, right? On top of kernel, you are running the application. So this is the architecture of operating system. Now here, parallel, if you see here, so Windows, actually, if you see the desktop or the graphical user interface in Windows is very good as compared to Linux. Why? Because it has something called separate kernel. It is having this kernel called graphic device drivers. So if you want to run a game called NFS, right? That if you want to run here, then in Windows it will be very fast. You'll look very good graphical look and feel, right? As compared to Linux. Why? Because they have this graphical device drivers, one small kernel, which will only contain the hardware detail of the graphics. Suppose I have a graphic card here, for those details will be stored here, and that will be operated by one more small kernel called DirectX. So if you are running a game, it will not come to, so application means what? A game which you are running, it will not go to this kernel and then it will connect to the hardware. No, it will use your DirectX kernel, and which will connect to one more small subkernel called graphics device drivers, which will communicate to that device or graphic device, which will actually perform very fast as compared to Linux. So this is the architecture of Windows. So this has already been covered, what is HAL and all, and kernel will do everything for operating system, right? Applications are nothing, your MS Words and all. So these are something about Windows. Now let us talk about a file system which is called NTFS, NT file system, new technology file system. which is actually successor to FAT32. Now, as I told you, FAT32 will tell you that you cannot use a single file which is more than 4 GB. It has that boundary problem because it will not support a file which is more than 4 GB. Now, if you want to use a file which is more than 4 GB on your pen drive, that pen drive should be formatted with this particular file system called NTFS, right? It should be formatted with NTFS. What do you mean by formatting of pen drive? Formatting of pen drive is nothing. You are actually writing a file system onto the pen drive. Formatting of pen drive is nothing. You are writing a file system onto the pen drive. That this is the file system which is going to use, and you can store the files on this file system, right? So NTFS can store more than 4 GB of file. It can store more than 4 GB of file. So if your file is more than 4 GB, say 10 GB, you can use NTFS. Again, NTFS provide you the long file name, file and folder permissions. See, in Linux, we talked about permission, read permission, write permission. Same thing applies here in Windows also. Windows also, you have permission. Windows also, because you are having multiple logins are there and people are accessing those files of other users. So you should have permissions, right? But FAT32 will not give you the permissions, whereas NTFS only will give you the permission, right? So if you want to use your Windows securely, ensure that your Windows is formatted with NTFS or your pen drive is formatted with NTFS. Also, NTFS will give you the feature of encryption. So what do you mean by encryption? You can encrypt your file and store on your system, right? The file can be encrypted and the same encrypted file can be actually stored onto the system. Even you can compress also. You compress means what? You suppose file size is say 2 GB. You can compress, make it say 1 GB, and that can be stored there. So NTFS will support compression, zipping, encryption also will support. So these are the features of NTFS. Okay. Now let us talk about disk management. Okay, one question which is there here. What is that? Okay. Mr. Vipin Yadav is asking, sir, in our office, some scanners require FAT formatted pen drive, and they did not recognize NTFS formatted. Why it is so? That's what this scanners machine or other printing devices, printers and all, they don't want, see, scanner machine, they don't want a file which is more than 4 GB. Do you have any file which is more than 4 GB? No, right? Even that if you use, because FAT file system is lighter than NTFS. It is very lightweight. So that's why you can those kind of devices always use FAT only. And you know the FAT is most common file system used across. So everybody will use FAT only, and FAT can be used in those the devices like scanners or printers, right? So let us talk about disk management. Let us talk about disk management in Windows. So disk management, using disk management, what you can do, you can actually partition your hard drive, right? You can monitor your disk, and that's what you can again configure something called RAID. You know what is RAID? RAID is redundant array of independent disk. Why it does? Suppose if you have more than one hard drive in your system, and you can do what thing, you can configure them as a RAID, so that in case one hard drive fails, still your system will be up and running, right? So the RAID configuration always will be used in server class machine, but desktop is rarely used, right? So that also can be configured using disk management. So let us open this disk management. How to open this disk management? I'll just run a command here. The command is, okay, this disk management will open using, you can see this PC is there in your system. You have this PC, right? This PC. On this PC, you just right click and say manage. This PC, right click and say manage. I want to manage that system in Windows. So click on that. Then this window will open, right? So here you can manage your disk. You can see here you have disk management option. Even you can have a user management also. You can delete users. So if you click on this user management option here this, right? So here you can click on this and then you can get number of users. So if you click on that user here, these are the user which is by default created when this administrator is by default created, right? This is by default created along with this guest also is by default created. These two users the user has created. So these two users the user has created, right? So if you want to create a new user, you can easily create here. Click on users and then say new user, right? Click on user and say new user. So how to create user? You say user name is Vipin. Suppose Vipin. Full name is Vipin Yadav. Description for demo I'm using. I'm creating this user for demo. Password, any password we can write, right? So I'll write some password. Let us see that is working on. Ask for the complexity requirement. It has created. You can see now Vipin has been created. So you can manage your users. How to manage your users? Double click on that, and you want to make Vipin as an administrator of this system. Then say member of. Currently member of is what? You can see member of it is normal user. Currently Vipin is of user, right? So user has a restriction. They cannot install the new applications or new software. They cannot install, right? They cannot see the other files and all. So these are the restrictions which is there on these users. So if you want to make Vipin as an administrator, what you do? Member of, click on add and say I want to become or I want to make this Vipin user as an administrators, right? So this is administrators, this which you are right here. Once this is done, you say check names, it will be done and say okay. Now Vipin has become administrator. So once you log out and log in as Vipin will be administrator for this particular system, right? Now let us move to the disk management. So disk management, you can see this is the disk management console here in this computer management of Windows. Here you can see a lot of information is shown. These are 1 to 1 disk, 3 partitions are created, right? This is partition number 1, partition number 2, and so on. Okay, so this is the size, capacity, everything is mentioned, and how much free partition is there that will show here and all, right? So these are the default thing which can be used. Now this is one hard drive, right? Hard drive, it is of say 931 GB. It is saying that this hard drive is 1 TB, 931 GB. And here it is having how many partitions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 partitions are there. Remaining 12 MB, you can again create new partitions, right? So this is how you can manage your partition. This is disk 1 of my pen drive, which is I inserted here. This is of 14 GB or 16 GB, whatever, right? So like you can manage your hard drive. You can monitor whether your hard drive is full or what. So this is part of a disk management. Okay, let us move next. Let us compare Windows and Linux. We need to compare Windows versus Linux. Now Linux, as I told you, Linux is what? Is an open source. Okay, again Vipin Yadav is asking, sir, while formatting it shows FAT, NTFS and exFAT. What is exFAT? It is called extended FAT. It is called the extended FAT. So extended FAT actually, it is generic term. Earlier it was FAT. You can use it now as an extended FAT, which can be used in any operating system, right? For example, Linux is also supporting exFAT. Okay, let us do this comparison. So Linux is what? It is actually open source. Linux is what? It is open source. So you know the meaning of open source means you have a freedom of what? Sorry. Freedom of actually getting this source code, downloading, modifying it, and distributing it, right? But that source code, whatever given to you, should be under some license. It's called GNU General Public License, GPL, right? So this is open source, whereas the Windows is a closed source. it will not give you actually that open code, source code with you. Source code they will not give you if you want to buy Windows. They will only give you the software application. That's all. The source code, the actual code in that Windows is developed, that is not been given to you, right? So this is the main difference between Linux and Windows. Now, second is what, as I told you, Linux is free to use. There is no cost is associated with Linux. Whereas if you want to get the support of Linux, then only you have to pay. For example, you have bought, as I told you, you have bought Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 or 9, right? Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 you bought. That Red Hat Enterprise Linux you bought, you have paid for the support. Support means what? I developed my own hardware. That hardware is not attaching to computer. So who will give the support? Red Hat community will give the support because you already bought from them, right? So it is free, but support is not free. For support, you have to get the you have to pay and get. Whereas in Windows, there is a cost which has been associated. The cost range from $150 to $320 if you talk about Windows 8.1. Windows 10 is different. Again, Linux is free software and Windows is actually from proprietary from Microsoft, you have to pay. One advantage of Linux over Windows is live CDs or DVD or OS is available. So what do you mean by live? Suppose I am running my Windows operating system, right? I want to shut down and run only Linux. So in that case, Linux is providing you a method called live distribution, whereas you have to install that live distribution into pen drive or CD, and the same you have to boot from CD or pen drive. So that Linux will be booted live. No need to install. So when you want to test it, then boot it live and you can use it. That's all. No need to install. But this Windows is not alive. Windows is always you have to install and then use it. People says Linux is more secure than Windows, right? You cannot say Windows is insecure. No, Linux is actually more secure than Windows. Why? Because I'll ask you one question. Whether do we have viruses for Linux? Do we have a computer virus for Linux? Can you write, anybody of you, if you know? Yes or no? Do we have a virus for Linux? Just think and type yes or no. Rishabh Jain is telling no virus for Linux. Saurabh also is telling no. Okay, Chaitanya is telling yes, we do have virus for Linux. Okay, good. So as I told you, Linux is more secure than Windows, that's all. But Linux also has a virus, right? What is virus? Virus nothing. It is a program which is created by malicious user to invade your system, right? To change the operation of your system, to copy your data, to destroy your data, to actually it will change operation of your system. So what is a virus? Virus is nothing like that. Now here, Linux also may have some software, malicious software, where it will change the operation of the Linux machine, right? A lot of softwares are available which actually malfunction or which will create the disturbance in Linux, or they can get your data from the Linux machine, right? So we do have computer virus for the Linux, and here it is called as a toolkit. Here it is called the toolkit. So Kaushik Ghosh is saying yes, we have Linux malware. Yeah, it's called malicious software is called malware, right? It's called a malware. So that's why we are uninstalling many Android softwares. Dr. Suresh K is telling that's why we are uninstalling many Androids. Yes. So that's what, as I told you, Linux also has a virus, and Android is what? Android is Linux based. The kernel is purely Linux kernel, right? And Android also has malicious app, which is nothing, it's a virus, right? So those virus, what it will do, it can track your SMS. It can track what you're doing. It can track your geolocation and all. So these are the malicious software in Linux, right? So Linux also has a virus, but Linux actually is more secure than Windows. Windows viruses, plenty of viruses are available on internet, and people or the hackers always target Windows machines as compared to Linux. right? So Windows is actually insecure. Linux is secure, you can say like that, but Linux is more secure than Windows. What else we can compare? Linux can be installed on any lower hardware cost. So as I told you that Android phones are available less than 5,000 or 10,000 rupees, you can get it, right? Even Linux can be installed on supercomputers also. Whereas in Windows, you have to have a good machine and you can install. Even Windows mobile phone also are available, but it is costly, more than 25,000 rupee. Linux is customizable added feature. It has a customizable added feature. So if you want, you can customize your operating system and install. For example, I don't want to install graphical user interface. I only want to install the command line. That's all. So you can customize and then install. Windows will not give you that feature. Windows desktop version, server version will give, but desktop version will not give you that feature of customizing. So Jain is telling, I thought only rootkits are rootkits. Again, it's a malware. It's a malicious software for Linux. That's all. Which will do what? They will try to get the root password. Right? Rootkit will try to get the root password somehow. So how root password? Root password is what? Administrator password they'll try to get. So how they will do? So a normal user, suppose I have created one game called Candy Crush game for Linux, right? And that I'm giving to you. Now you install that game on Linux virtual machine or VirtualBox. Once you install that game is nothing. It is a game. Along with that game, you have a keylogger installed, right? So keylogger means what? Whatever keys you're typing, it is logging and storing in that files. So you are typing the root password somehow. When you're typing the root password, that root password also will be getting logged. Once root password is getting logged, what this malware which I given to you will use that root password to install some malicious things inside your system. So that can be installed in the kernel. That can be attached to the kernel, right? So once it is attached to the kernel, you cannot heal it. You cannot remove it unless kernel has to be formatted. So those are called rootkits. Okay, see, these are the basic difference between Windows and Linux, which you should know if you're using. So this concept already we have covered. What is virtualization in depth? We have covered. Why we need virtualization also we have covered. If you see this diagram, it is mentioned why we need virtualization, because we are saving our cost. Earlier in the data centers, the CPU or the servers, they were underutilized, right? So to make them heavily utilized or fully utilized, you have to do virtualization. Again, if you are doing virtualization, only few servers are required. Here more servers were required, and now you are saving the cost. Earlier the cost was this, now you are saving the cost. So you are actually saving the cost when you are doing virtualization, right? Okay, so tools and software used for virtualization. Number one tools, what I mentioned to you, is VirtualBox. So if you see this diagram, the VirtualBox is one of the software virtualization tool. You have plenty. You have one more. I'll just write it down here. You can have VMware. You can have VMware. VMware free is available. Workstation free. You can download and use it. But if you want more functionality, you can use the proprietary VMware vSphere and all. Then we have from Linux also we have virtualization tool. In Linux also we have something called KVM. KVM is virtualization tool in Linux. So here suppose Linux is running, and then you can even install VirtualBox, or KVM is by default, which is there in Linux, right? So VMware virtualization tool is there, KVM is there. Then we have for Windows exclusively we have Hyper-V. This is for Windows. So if you are installing Windows Server machine, Hyper-V by default is there. So no need to install this VirtualBox. In Windows only Hyper-V is there, install guest operating system, right? So if you are using Windows Server 2016, Server 2019, Hyper-V will be always there. No need to install third-party VirtualBox. So these are some more hypervisor which is available to you, which you can try it out, you can use it. Okay. here. So virtual lab with VirtualBox, which has already been explained, right? Along with the demo we have explained. Suppose you want to download Windows or Linux, you can download the ISO from the Windows. Anyway, you cannot download. You cannot download. If you want, you can buy the Windows and then you can install, right? If you're downloading Windows from internet, means what? You are actually doing piracy. If you're downloading internet Windows from the internet freely, no, see, Windows always ask for money, right? For example, Windows 10, you have to pay at least say 12,000 rupees. So if you want to install Windows, pay 10,000 rupees, you get it. So, and if you are installing on VirtualBox Windows 10, you're downloading from the internet, there is a pirated copy that you're installing, means you're doing piracy. Please don't do piracy. We have a lot of problems with the piracy. Along with that, our system will be infected with some malware, right? It may become bot. That bots and all, it will be nicely covered later by Dr. Misbah. Okay, so that's what Linux easily you can download and install on VirtualBox. So already demo has been given for Linux. So this is about this session. Now let me continue with the other. Any question if you have, please let me know. You can type here. This is about basics of Windows. Then we'll move back to operating system hardening. Operating system hardening. Any question in Windows or Linux? Okay, so we'll continue now with this hardening. Now let us discuss something about operating system hardening. Now, what do you understand by operating system hardening? Before that, let us see the goals of system security, right? So in the morning by Murthy sir, some of the terms are already covered: integrity, confidentiality, reliability, authentication, and all. Now, what do you mean by integrity? First of all, these are the properties of security, right? These are the properties of the security: integrity, confidentiality, reliability, authentication. Now, if you want to know what is integrity, suppose you are downloading a software from the internet. Suppose you are downloading, say, Firefox from the website called firefox.com or Mozilla Firefox.com, right? That file which you are downloading, in between, hacker has modified, and the modified version has been sent to you. And in that modification, he has put some malware. And when you're installing the Firefox, you're actually installing the malware along with the Firefox. So here, there's a breach of integrity. So integrity will guarantee that the data is what you are expected. It should be genuine. Whatever you are downloading, the same file should come to you. That will be ensured by the integrity, right? The second term of the security is called confidentiality. Confidentiality. Confidentiality means what? Suppose I am having a file, a confidential file which is stored in my system. Nobody should be able to access that file. Only authorized person, authorized people who is authorized to see, they only can access that, right? Then there is a property of the confidentiality will be satisfied. If only authorized person can see, then it is satisfied. Next is what? Reliability. Reliability will be nothing is availability. You can say it is availability. Whenever you want some service, that service should be available. Whenever I want to use my system or internet should be available with me, right? That is called reliability or availability. Next is authentication. Authentication, right? Authentication will always guarantee that only authorized person can access the resources. For example, here I log into my Ubuntu. So I am giving my username and password, and then I will be authenticated. Means I am authorized because password is there with me. I am authorized to access that system. So these are the 4 security, you can say, characteristics or properties of the security which should be there. If these 4 properties are there in the some secure transaction, then you can say you are pretty much secure, right? Or in your computer system, these 4 properties are there, then you can say your computers are more secure. So what are the most common attacks on your system, right? You can have a network attacks. So network attack means what? My system, it is part of the internet, means it is connected to network, right? So if it is connected to network, nobody able to access the packets which I'm sending to you, right? Whatever packets which has been sent from my system to your system, It should not be accessed by anybody else. But there are some means using that you can access those packets, and that is called packet sniffing, using man-in-the-middle attack, or using DNS hijacking or DNS hacking, right? So there can be these kind of attacks in the network. Now you can have something called multiple, or you can say web attacks, right? There you have phishing, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and all. A lot of attacks are there. Actually, all those things you will get to know when your this course progress. You'll get to know about those web attacks. Then some OS application or software attacks will be there. For example, viruses, as I told you, viruses, trojans, worms, toolkits, and all. A lot of things are there, which is again will make your system vulnerable. Then finally, you have something called social engineering attack, right? So if you are not able to get a system, if you want to get a password of one person, you will do social engineering on that. You want to guess the password of that guy. Suppose that guy is having a password of his father name, you will try to guess that, right? So this is nothing, is a social engineering attack. You have to fool that guy and get the password. Okay, so not all the hackers and evil wrongdoers are trying to steal your information. You have something called ethical hackers, or you can tell them as a penetration testers or researchers or consultant, which actually will do hacking to make the organization more secure. So how to secure your system? How to secure your system? To secure your system, you have to do first task is what? Operating system hardening. You have to harden your operating system, right? Now, what is operating system hardening? We'll just see in the next few slides. And apart from operating system hardening, you have to physically secure your system. For example, in our case, CDAC, we have a data center. Suppose that data center is exposed to public. Public means what? Anybody can access the data center, go to inside and do whatever. So we need to have physical security also, right? So this is the next part, right? Then final part is what? System threat protection. So some specific threats which can be there on some specific application, that also we have to harden and protect. Now, what is operating system hardening? So to know that what is operating system hardening, let me open MS Paint. Okay, so you can see that this is your operating system. This is nothing, it's your operating system. It is OS, any OS, Windows or Linux, anything, right? So this operating system, suppose you have got this operating system along with the laptop or desktop what you have bought, or you have installed this operating system, right? And you have selected the default installation. So if it is a default installation or pre-installed operating system, what you are getting, this operating system will have a lot of problems. What are those problems? Problem number one is there can be a default usernames, right? Default usernames like guest. So this operating system, whatever you got it along with your laptop or you installed with the default installation, that operating system may have default guest account. For example, here we have seen that guest account is there. If you see here in Windows, the guest account is there. Hacker can use this guest account to first install some keyloggers, and then he can get the actual passwords, right? So what we need to do, we need to disable this kind of temporary accounts or default logins, right? We have to disable those default logins. So we need to disable those default logins. Next is what? Apart from that, that operating system will have what? It will have default software packages, right? It will have default software packages. What does that mean? So if you install Windows, you will get something called lot of default software, like you are getting some games. In Linux also you'll get some games, right? Or some unwanted software which actually we don't want here. That has to be removed. So that if default softwares are there, if you're not using them, you remove, unless or otherwise what will happen? The hacker will use those software. If you're not patching or updating those software, hacker can use those software to actually target your system very easily, right? So those default software packages has to be removed, right? those default software packages has to be removed. So how to see in Windows default software packages? You go to install, uninstall program. I'm just searching uninstall. You can see here, add or remove programs. Here you see what are the default things which is not needed, you remove, right? Dell Support Assistant, suppose this is default, I have not installed this, right? This Support Assistant, never ever I'll be going to use it, right? If this Support Assistant will have some weaknesses, vulnerabilities, some problems in it, hacker can exploit those problems and get into your system. So those kind of thing has to be uninstalled, right? See, Dell command, something is there. Anyway, Dell update is needed, right? And other things, lot of things will be there, which is by get help, Microsoft get help, which is not needed, right? Like that, lot of things are there which you have to find out and remove them if you are not using it. So first thing is default the user names or user accounts, right? Second is remove the default software packages. Third is what? In your system, whenever you are installing from the scratch or you are getting from the vendor as a part of your hardware, in those systems we have actually unwanted software, or we can say network services. Unwanted network services are there, which is by default it is there, which we need to remove it. For example, in Linux, if you install by default NFS services, by default is there, which will use for file sharing, which is Linux nobody is using, right? So those kind of services we have to find out and we have to remove it from the Linux. So what we are doing, we are hardening our system. This is the process of hardening, right? So we have to delete all the unwanted network services. And then in your system, you will have a default password policy, right? You need to change password policy. Password policy means what? Suppose in your system you have say 10 users and you should have actually the strong password policy set. For example, for those 10 users, your username and password or password should be 10 characters or 10 digits or whatever. It complexity should be 10, right? Minimum 10. And apart from that, you should use a combination uppercase, lowercase, right? Even you can use a special character inside the password, and we should not reuse the password. For example, after every 4 months, password has to be changed. Then you cannot use the previous old password which has been there. So those password policy has to be made and it should be applied to your operating system. Apart from that, your operating system needs to be updated frequently. Right? So your operating system, suppose I'm talking about Windows 10. So Windows 10, it came in say 1 year back or 2 years back, right? So during that time, when initially when they gave the Windows 10, that time the bugs or the problems were not identified. But when you are keep using, new problems or vulnerabilities or bugs are getting identified. Those bugs has to be patched, right? So you have to update your system regularly. Windows will always give you a feature called auto update. Automatically, if any update is there on the Microsoft, it will be installed on the system. But that feature has to be turned on, right? That feature has to be turned on. Auto update feature has to be turned on, right? So update your system regularly. And finally, your operating system should be installed with something called antivirus. You have to install antivirus. Protect your system with antivirus, right? So lot of antivirus are available on the internet. Actually, free antivirus you should not install. So you can see that I have one system, and if you want antivirus, you can get that antivirus for say 250 rupees or 300 rupees max for 1 year. For next 1 year, in the 300 rupees, my system is secure, right, from the viruses. So what you are doing, you are actually reconfiguring your system. So this operating system is what I am reconfiguring my system from default state to more secure state, right? From default state to more secure state. So this process is what is called operating system hardening, right? This process is called OS hardening. So this process is called operating system hardening, right? Okay, we have some questions here from Jatin Kumar. Sir, isn't the Windows Defender enough for antivirus? It depends. Windows Defender will do the real-time protection, right? Suppose you are downloading one virus and double-clicking, it will say that this is a virus, it will heal, right? But in case you have copied the virus, you are not running it, you just copied and stored on your desktop, right? So in that case, it will not be detected by the Defender, right? And Defender also, we don't know, it has been from Microsoft, they are giving the virus signature, whether they have all the virus signature or not. So that's why third-party virus we should trust and then we should install, right? Along the Defender, you have to install third-party antivirus. And one more question is there, whether Windows Defender is sufficient. Same question, right? So Windows Defender is actually, along with Defender, you have to install third-party antivirus, right? So this is what is about operating system hardening. Let us move to the slides here. Any other question? If you can have, you please type in the chat window. There is a school of thought. What question they are saying that third-party software is most vulnerable of what? Suppose I am buying antivirus from McAfee. It's a well-known company for security, for giving security solutions, right? If I am buying from that, why I'll be having some issue, right? So that's why those companies, they made it. We have Trend Microsystem, we have McAfee. Lot of companies are there, Kaspersky and all, right? So these well-known antivirus solutions are available, which will give you the antivirus solution, which is actually protecting, which has a more signature than other like Windows Defender and all, right? Okay, then what is antivirus technically? Antivirus is nothing. It's a software which has some database of, or it is called signature database, where the virus pattern is already stored. So if you are running some file, it will see that this file is having virus infected or not. So it will match the pattern of that file, right? So already pattern is stored there. They have a database. In the database, we'll see the pattern is matching, means it's a virus. They will not run it, and they will say that this file has to be removed from the system and put to some quarantine zone. So file will be quarantined, right? Pattern is nothing. It's a signature. How you will say that it is a virus? So it will see the header file of that virus, right? Virus file, and even content also, right? What they have written. So that content is already there in the database or not, right? That content is already there in database. If that content is matching, means it's actually a virus. So it's nothing. It's a pattern matching. It's a the what I said, signature matching. Okay, so a lot of questions are there. Some antivirus allows to quarantine or remove infected files. Is it safe to quarantine? What is the use of quarantine? And see, I'll tell you the technicalities behind the quarantines. You have very good file. Good file means your file is very important to you, right? Some very good stuff you have written there. Suppose I have written a research paper, right? And that research paper actually is there in my Word file. Now that Word file is getting infected with the virus. I cannot delete it, right? Because I'll lose my research paper. I'll lose my research paper, right? So what I'll do, I'll make it as a quarantine and then try to remove virus from that particular file. So this is the use case of quarantine, right? You understood? Okay, so let us move back here to the process of operating system hardening. Any operating system which is vulnerable to attack if it is not properly configured. So your operating system which is here, if it is not properly reconfigured, then it is vulnerable to the attacks, right? Attacker can use one of these to come inside your system. So hardening of operating system is the first step towards safeguarding your system from the intrusion. Yeah, it's the first step, right? You cannot say that after hardening you can say I am foolproof, nobody can hack me. No, we have other method to hack people like social engineering. Other methods are there. So hardening of operating system involves the removal of non-restrictional tools, utilities, and other system management options, or any of which could be used to ease hackers' part to your system. Same thing. So these things we have to remove under software packages, network services, and a lot of things are there which we need to find out and we have to remove. So what is the operating system hardening? It is the act of reconfiguring your system from default state, which is called factory state, to more secure one. So what we are doing? We are reconfiguring our system. So it was the default configuration. We again reconfigured it from default state to more secure state. Now, once you do all, your system will become more secure, right? Your system will become more secure. Do antivirus program also disinfect the infected files? Some of them definitely do, right? If you put, if they are able to remove, they can remove those code and put it somewhere, and then that file will be safe. So this virus code, the malicious code which they inserted in that file, that can be removed, right? So some of the antivirus will definitely do, but this Windows Defender doesn't do that. Windows Defender only will detect, it will not heal it, it cannot remove it, right? As per my knowledge, Windows Defender will not heal it, it will not remove it. But some of the antivirus, definitely they will heal it also, because what is that? It's a piece of malicious code which is inserted inside that file, and that malicious code is actually nothing, is a virus. So if that malicious code, all those codes can be removed from the file will become good, right? Now, purpose of the operating system hardening is what? The following is the list of commonly known types of attacks that we all know: viruses, worms, trojans, and all. Wiretapping, sniffing. What is wiretapping? If you have a system, right? Suppose we are getting a lease line, internet lease line from some ISP. From ISPs that point to our point, suppose wire is coming, physical wire is coming, the hacker can cut that wire and put a tape device. They can see our full traffic. So it's called wiretapping, right? So a lot of things are there. DOS attack, denial of service attacks, and all. So once the system has been compromised, the intruder can do a number of things. For example, he or she can modify or destroy your information, right? He can disclose your sensitive information, right? He also can install malicious code to gather some more information. He will install something to my system, and then in that system, some more information he can gather later, right? Install malicious code to gather information, right? Use the control server to attack other system. Lot of things he can do. Now, the purpose of operating system hardening is what? To provide a reference guideline to improve the resistance of your operating system to the attacks. So after this steps, your operating system will become strength. It will have some strength, right, to defend of some of the attacks, not all. So how to harden an operating system? What are the process, right? So we don't have a single process. You follow the same. You will follow the same, and then you will be able to harden your operating system. So you would apply the patches, which I told here. Update your system regularly means apply the patches here. Then one more important step which I missed here is system audit and login. So one more step is it is a part of operating hardening is what? Auditing your system. Keep auditing your system audit, right? Or log audit. So this is very important. It is not like you are done and then done these steps and then you are not auditing your system. Keep seeing your log, what is happening, right? Audit your system. We have, I'll show you some demo of some audit tool for Windows as well as Linux. Then you will get to know that. Then some network related configuration you do, like this unwanted network services you uninstall and all, right? And applications, unwanted software packages you remove, right? Put rules and policies like password policies and all you put. So these are some of the steps of hardening. So first thing is what? Install only what you need. So if you're installing the operating system from the scratch, right? So install only the packages which is needed. I'm talking about Linux. Windows by default everything will come, but Linux you can customize. As I told you, this is the benefit of Linux. You can customize it. So the games you can remove. You don't want to select. Please don't select games and all. Right? Some databases by default. Suppose the system will not become a database server, then why need the database and all? So a lot of things are there which you can remove. Office style application and tool. If you're not using, you can remove. Right? Most important thing, X Windows, graphical user interface, GNOME and KDE. If you don't want to use GNOME or KDE, you can actually remove them, right? Why? Because here, if you see here, one of the most important requirements then choosing not to install packages in all X Windows. Suppose your system is becoming a mail server, not an end user's desktop I'm talking about. Suppose for the organization I'm talking about. One organization is having one mail server. So that mail server, if you're installing X Windows, then a lot of applications will be installed along with the X Windows to make it functional, right? So those also will be installed. So better to remove X Windows, means remove graphical user interface. We don't want. We can configure Linux from the command. You might have seen that command, everything we can do, right? The command prompt is called terminal. Using that, we can do everything, right? So that's why you should not install X Windows if it is acting as a mail server or organization some important server. But it is an end user system, then okay, you can install X Windows because that is pretty much needed. Next is secure your hardware, right? Suppose an attacker has a physical access to a system. You have done an operating system hardening, everything you did, but still your system is exposed to the end user or the hacker. The hacker can steal your laptop or desktop, right? So once he has stolen your desktop or laptop, he can actually access your files, even though he is actually not knowing your username and password. What he will do? He will boot your laptop with what? With live CD of Linux, and using live CD, he can access your files which is stored in your hard drive, right? So that's why always limit physical access to the hardware. Apart from that, use BIOS password. So if I use BIOS password, the hacker who has stolen my laptop, he cannot access the hard drive. Why? Because if BIOS password is set to boot from the live CD or live pen drive, you need to enter the BIOS password, right? So BIOS password has to be given. So if I'm giving the BIOS password, he cannot see the content. Again, after install, set the hard drive to first boot device. So in the booting sequence, first boot device will be always hard drive. It should not be pen drive. If it is pen drive, then even the BIOS is there, the hacker is booting from pen drive and live CD is booting, and then he will get the access of your system. So bootloaders are there in Linux. Actually, to boot any operating system, you need a bootloader. So that bootloader also has to be secured. This is actually I should not cover because I have to go deep in the bootloaders and all. That I'll just skip. This I'll skip. Now, removing unnecessary software packages. As I told you, if you install with the base installation, default installation, lot of software will be installed. So in Linux, you can see this is a part of Linux hardening. So many unwanted softwares are there which you need to remove. Some of them I have written here. Lot of them are there which is not needed, right? Again, these many other applications should be removed. SendMail is a mail server. We don't want, right? Mail server is not needed and all. So how to remove? In CentOS, this is the command to remove. But in Ubuntu, you can say apt-get remove that particular package name which you want to remove. So apt-get update and then suppose ASH. So apt-get remove ASH. apt-get remove SendMail. apt-get remove Quota, Procmail, and so on, right? And as I told you, this unneeded network services also has to be stopped or removed. So lot of unneeded network services in Linux. You can see DSCP, right? DS Relay, SMB, Samba, and a lot of things are there which needs to be removed. So that you will do. So whenever you're installing the Linux for hardening, unwanted software, please remove. Again, they are telling that don't use a Telnet and FTP, use SSH. Now, what does that mean? SSH, Telnet, both are used for remote login. What do you mean by remote login? Remote login is nothing. I want to access a server which is located at remote site. So how I will access? I will access through remote login software. So their remote login server is running. I will be using remote login client. So remote login server is SSH and remote login client is SSH client, right? So that we have to use it. So they're telling that Telnet and SSH, you always use SSH instead of Telnet. Don't use Telnet. Why? Because Telnet will always, your username and password, your full communication is unencrypted. You can see here Telnet and FTP are plain text protocol. What does that mean? Your data from one system to other system, remote server, the login and password which you're typing, it is going into plain text, clear text. And if anybody is doing wiretapping or sniffing, they can get your password. They can get the remote server password, which you are typing here for accessing, right? It should be replaced by SSH. SSH means secure connection, secure shell, means from end to end encryption is there. So in between, if someone is doing wiretapping, they will see the junk thing, encrypted packet they will see, not the actual password, right? So this is what is there. Use always SSH. Don't use Telnet and FTP. See, FTP is file transfer protocol. SSH also will give you secure file transfer, right? Or secure file copying from one system to others. Deleting unnecessary users and group. So you can see a lot of unnecessary users are there in Linux, right? So you have a lot of unnecessary users that should be removed. In Windows, we had only one user called guest, whereas here a lot of unwanted users are there in Linux. So that also has to be removed. Password security, password policy you have to set. Secure your password rule. This has already been talked, right? It is, we said that do not allow password with dictionary word and all, like dog or whatever, elephant. Dictionary word should not be allowed. Again, it says that don't allow password with only letters or numbers, right? Ensure the user do not use personal information such as date of birth, pet names, or whatever, family members' names. They should not use inside the password. Again, the set minimum password length of the password is 10. Longer is better, right? Minimum password length, number of characters or number of digits what you're using, the length should be 10 minimum. Again, I told you earlier, we have to use uppercase, lowercase, and all. This is a general thing which we already knows, right? Again, this is the important thing. You should always change your password, regularly change your password. I'm 100% sure that many of you have not changed your banking account password since long, right? Many of you, not all, many of you. Out of this 85, I guess more than say 45 or 50, they have not changed their passwords from the beginning. The same password only they are using. So we need to change our password regularly. How often? It depends. For example, it depends on the whether you are using your password for your financial transaction, or you're using for only Gmail or Facebook and so. So for Gmail and all, you can use for every 6 months or 1 year you can change. Whereas for financial thing, every 3 months to 6 months you have to change your password, right? But many of us actually we don't do that. We never change our password. Again, ensure the new password is not same as the previous passwords, right? So this is Linux password policy saying that previous password, whatever we have typed, it should not be same as a new password. So his password history is saving, and we should not type the previous password as a new password. Again, root security. Root is what? Root account, root user account, administrator user account. Now root, if you want to access root as a remotely, right? So I am accessing one server which is stored, which is kept in say CDAC Hyderabad, and that server I am accessing as a root. So I know the root password of the server. I should not directly type root and username and root password. Instead of, I should type as a normal user, and then I say su switch user to root. Then root I'll access. So that's what this is a root security which is there. Okay, file system security. So file system security says that In Linux, we have default permission of the file, right? Default permission. Whenever a user will create a file or directory, some permission will be assigned to that file. That permission should be very, 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 very restricted, right? For example, if I am creating a file, the file permission should be for owner, it will be either 7, means read, write, execute. For group owner, it is only read, it should be read. For others, it should be nothing, right? It should be nothing. So that file system security, you have to say that your permission to the default creation of file should be set accordingly. So this thing, it says that you keep your disk usage periodically, right? For example, in Linux, as I told you that it needs say 10 GB or 20 GB minimum for Ubuntu to install. Once you install Ubuntu, check your disk usage regularly using a command, this df-k, right? It will show you the disk usage of that particular Ubuntu operating system. In that, it will show you how much space you occupied there. So keep looking at it regularly, periodically, to know whether your file system is full or someone is actually using your file system and putting some data out. Okay. Again, we should scan for exploits and rootkits. So I already told you what do you mean by rootkit and all in Linux, right? So we have two tools called Rootkit Hunter and CHK Rootkit. It can be installed on Ubuntu or any version of Linux, which will actually check whether rootkit is running inside your Linux or not. Whether any rootkit is running inside your Linux or not. It will only tell you whether rootkit is running or not, right? So these two commands or tools are there which will check for the rootkit, whether it is available in Linux or not. Then you have to update the system or your software or application regularly, right? So you have the commands to update your system in Linux, Red Hat Linux, you have a command called yum, even update up to date also is there. In Debian or Ubuntu, Kali, apt-get, these two commands are there to update your system. Yum update, apt-get update, right? So one website says that more than 100 new vulnerabilities are being posted to Bugtrack each month. So Bugtrack is a website. Every month, more than new vulnerabilities related to OS will be always put there, right? So we need to ensure that our operating system is up to date. Our operating system doesn't have those kind of vulnerability, right? So something is written, a patched OS is only secure until the next vulnerability in the underlying OS or allowed services is discovered. So you cannot say that today I have patched my operating system and tomorrow new vulnerability has come, which I have not patched, but still my system is not secure. Today I patched, but tomorrow it is not secure. So daily I do the update, right? So in Windows, we have a feature of auto update. Automatically your system will be updated, provided you have not disabled that particular feature. So this is all about operating system hardening of Linux. Any question, any queries? If you have, please write in the chat window. We'll just see. When is the break time? Any questions? No questions, right? Okay, so Naresh, when we can do a break? When we can take a break? Let me check. Huh? Just give me a 1 minute. I'll check whether what is the break time and all. Okay, it's 3:35. It is 3:35 to can we continue, sir? Actually, we would have taken break at 2:40, but I continued. You want me to take a break or what, sir? You want me to take a break or what, sir? Can we continue? I'm asking the audience, can we take a break or we can continue? Okay, we'll do one thing. We'll take a, say, 5 to 10 minutes of break, then we can continue. Right? Meanwhile, I'll just give the answer to the one of the questions which has been asked by Dr. Suresh sir. CDAC and NIC always suggesting Linux server instead of Windows server. Why? Okay. What I suggest you can use any server. Right? You can use any server provided your server is hardened. For example, if I'm using Windows Server 2019, right? And the 2019 Windows servers you are putting onto the internet for public to access. For example, a web service you are running on Windows Server 2019. Now that Windows Server 2019, if you are not configured properly, means you have not hardened that operating system, that then there is a lot of vulnerability in the Windows which is there, which can be exposed to the hackers, and they can use those vulnerability to target the system very easily, right? But in Linux, the same thing you are doing in Linux also. If Linux also is not hardened, then the same thing applies to Linux. Hacker can use, right? So any operating system is okay, provided you are doing the hardening process regularly, right, sir? Okay, so now it is a 3:12. We'll come back at say 3:22 after 10 minutes. 3:22.